Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Cars Reading Skills workshop as part of your Jack Westin MCAT podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing a Jack Westin Daily Passage called Moral Relativism, and it's the daily passage from our homepage, jackwestin.com, that was posted on November 19th. Now, if you're not listening to this on November 19th, no worries. You can check out the passage linked in the description. It's always nice to take a look at the passage before we dive in, because ultimately, in a reading skills workshop like this, we're going to go through a CARS passage sentence by sentence and talk about what the most important arguments and ideas are that are presented here. There's no better place to learn from CARS than our reading skills workshop because we actually have Jack Westin himself here to talk to us all about this. Jack, thank you for being here. These podcasts are so fun with you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd love doing it, especially with you, Molly. I think hopefully it's giving a lot of value to students across the globe. And yeah, I'm excited to jump into this one.
Yeah, this is a pretty fun passage. I know we were just talking about it. It's going to be a good one to get into. Not everyone loves philosophy passages, but this one, I mean, it feels like a pretty nice read. What did you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually they're shorter. You'll see that on the AMC as well. The actual practice exams that you're going to end up doing. But whenever the passage is conceptually more difficult to understand, they do tend to err on the side of shorter and less arguments, less ideas. So it's more important than ever to identify the right ideas, all the ideas, no such thing as the right idea. You have to actually find all the ideas and understand it fully, right? Identifying is one thing, understanding it is a completely different thing. And to understand it, you should read slowly and take into consideration the context of what's being discussed. And I'm excited to jump into this because I think it's a really, kind of interesting topic.
I agree. Okay, well, let's go ahead and hop in. We're going to start, as always, with sentence one of paragraph one. And it says, according to moral relativism, there is no single true morality. Okay, so pretty short and sweet, and it's pretty direct and extreme, honestly.
Right.
We're basically defining moral relativism, and we're saying there's no true or singular morality.
Right.
I
In
mean,
this moral relativism, right? Like whatever that means, there's
mhm.
no true no extreme word, right? It's one of those words that like tells you it's an absolute thing. Like look out for those kinds of words because those tend to give you an idea of where this is going. No single true morality. Now, when I think of morality, I think of right and wrong, right?
Mhm.
Morals. Um, so, okay, so there's no true right, there's no true wrong. That's interesting.
Yeah, or at least not one single one. It's going to be interesting to talk about and to think about. They're kind of making us ponder this here.
Yeah,
Okay. Whether something is morally right or wrong is relative to one or another morality or moral frame of reference. Okay, so now we're bringing in this idea that morals can be relative, and that to me sounds just like moral relativism. There's not one true morality, but you can express morality relative to other situations, it
no,
sounds
I could
like.
I could see a student asking, like, what does that mean? Right? Like
Mhm.
right or wrong is relative to one or another morality. I hope they will answer that, but I think if we understand what relative means, right? The idea of relative is it's always dependent on the circumstance, on the situation, right? And it's always measured from some base, right? So what I think the author is trying to say here is morality, right or wrong, is based on some sort of reference point, right? And that's
Mhm.
why I think it's saying frame of reference. Okay, so I mean, we could probably go into examples, but I think the idea is clear here, right? It's all relative, quote unquote. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, something can be morally right relative to people in the north of a country and morally wrong relative to the people in the south. So they're just pretty much expanding on that, giving us a little bit of context. So something could be right to some and wrong to others. It's relative.
Exactly. Exactly. So like let's say farming, right? A certain way of farming might be okay in the north, but terrible in the south, right?
Yeah.
And there could be different reasons, we don't know. But again, like what some people consider right may others may consider wrong and vice versa.
All right. It is useful to compare moral relativism to other kinds of relativism, such as motion relativism. Okay, so our topic for sure was moral relativism. Now it sounds like we are comparing it to something else, and that is useful. Okay, so it sounds like we're maybe going to go into motion relativism. If that's easier for us to understand, they might be setting up sort of an analogy. Like, hey, if you can understand motion relativism, moral relativism will be easier to understand.
Right. Right. So the concept is the same, but the context will be different. The context here is more about motion, which, kind of reminds me of physics, right? When I think of motion relativism, I think of like Doppler effect stuff, right?
Yeah.
But okay, let's keep reading and see where it goes.
Motion relativism suggests that there is no such thing as absolute motion or absolute rest. Okay, that kind of sounds like no single true morality. I kind of see the way they might be setting this up, but
Isn't that
okay.
interesting? No absolute rest. Like you can't just sit, right? And that's sort of like the whole physics idea, right?
Yeah.
Of inertia. So, okay.
Yeah. Okay, whether something is moving or at rest is relative to a spatio-temporal frame of reference. Okay, we may be losing a student or two out there. Maybe a student or two is rejoicing because of how much it sounds like physics. But this is cars, right? So I would keep reading. What I am picking up on is the use of the word relative and reference. So again, they're setting up a parallel between moral relativism and motion relativism.
Yep, and it seems like it's the same exact thing. No single true morality, no single true motion. Absolute rest or absolute motion doesn't exist. Neither does, this idea of absolute, right or absolute wrong. And they're all referencing. They're both using this space, this frame of reference. Moral frame of reference, spatio-temporal frame of reference. So it's very similar. The concept is very similar, but the context is totally different, right? This is more physics. Okay?
All right, something may be at rest in one frame of reference and moving in another. We're just still describing this. So, not a ton of new things to unpack from there. There is no such thing as absolute motion and absolute rest, but we can make do with relative motion and rest. Okay, so again, there's no absolute, but relative works. Sounds again like moral relativism and what we've suggested there. The last sentence of this paragraph, though, adds something kind of fun. It says, similarly, I agree with moral relativism's view that although there is no such thing as absolute right and wrong, we can still be moral with relative right and wrong. So
Hmm.
that sentence has almost exactly parallel phrasing to what came before um, with motion relativism, except we have very clearly stated the author agrees with moral relativism. Like, boom, throw a bow on it. There's your Christmas present, right? Or whatever, winter holiday or birthday,
Yeah.
right? Like that is a gift right there. I agree with moral relativism. Done.
That's
That's
it.
that's the author. That's
Yeah.
I is the author, right?
Yeah. And many students at this point will go, will this always happen? Will I always get a sentence at the end of the first paragraph that will clear up what the author cares about?
I
No.
wish.
No, this is something that usually is really difficult to find because it's not as direct and it could be anywhere in the passage. And you'll see as we keep reading how if this is important, they'll have to repeat it, right? The author has to repeat it. But when you see something this clear, like Molly said, it's a gift from above, right? So like make sure you keep track of this idea. This is what you've been looking for. I think this sentence and the first sentence happen to be very important. But again, depending on the author, they may not ever write like this, right? They may write in a different way where the ideas are brought up at the end of the passage or brought up in the middle of the passage. But this is very clear, all right? And it does mention the author, so I definitely need to keep track of it.
Yeah. So, Jack, what do you think is most important for a student to understand from paragraph one?
First and last sentence. There's no true morality, and we can still be moral with relative morality.
Yeah.
That's it. Right? If you understand those two ideas, we're good. So there is no true morality. You can't be right or wrong, right? Absolutely. Right? But um you can still be right or wrong based on a reference point. So it's relative.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at our second paragraph. Paul Boghossian suggests a different comparison. Okay, this is different. I don't know exactly. Maybe they're comparing the comparison in paragraph one was motion relativism to moral relativism. We're going to see, but this individual, Boghossian, is going to give us something different than what we saw before. Okay, so let's learn more about their or his perspective. When people decided that there were no witches and no such thing as witchcraft, they did not become relativists about witches. They gave up their beliefs about witches. Okay, so all of a sudden we're talking about witches. That must be the different comparison to morality. But they're saying they're not relativists. They're not embracing maybe this idea of moral relativism. They've given up. Witches seems pretty random of a comparison to make, but maybe that's suggesting what Boghossian might be, believing.
Right, right. So like if there's no witch, if there's no absolute way of looking at witches, maybe there's no relative way of looking at witches. Is that what it's trying to say?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
have to see. It would have been a mistake for them to conclude that witchcraft is a relative matter. Jack, it sounds like you're right. So that someone could be a witch in relation to one witch framework, but not in relation to another. So it sounds like there's no middle ground in Boghossian's idea, right? Or you can't really be relatively a witch. Um,
Right. You can't look at one witch and go, okay, how witch are you
yeah, how
compared to
witchy are
that
you?
witch? Yeah, how witchy are you compared to that witch, right? Paul Boghossian is just saying, listen, if you can't define a witch clearly, then let's not even talk about witches. Forget it.
Yeah,
Right. Okay, so maybe this is maybe the author. Well, I find it hard to believe that the author is presenting this idea to go against the idea of moral relativism
yeah,
because the author literally said in the previous paragraph, "I agree with moral relativism." So when I'm reading this, my mind is like, okay, this is probably going to be some tangential, random idea that I just need to keep track of in case they question asks about, non-relativism or Boghossian. If they ask about Boghossian, I know it's about paragraph two. If it asks about what if there is no such thing as relativism, that I know it's discussed in paragraph two. I don't think this is going to be the primary, purpose of this passage because of the way the author presented their idea, right? I agree, right? So, but I mean, maybe. I mean, it's very possible that the rest of this passage could deviate into this idea that there is no relativism, but I doubt that. Based on how it's been written so far.
yeah. They could be bringing up Boghossian just to like essentially prop that idea up and then knock it over and say, nope, I actually was right the whole time. This is why. So we'll
Or yeah,
see.
that's honestly the best reason why someone would bring up this idea, right? This idea is the opposite of what the author is claiming, and you would do so to knock it down, or just to seem more like logical, like if you notice, like we tend to agree with people who can see both sides of the argument, and that's sort of what medical school interviews are all about. They don't really care what side of the argument you pick. What they like, are you for abortion? Are you against abortion? This or that. What they're really looking for is can you see both sides? Can you understand both perspectives? And this is the author trying to do that. The author is trying to tell us right here, oh, well, look, there are some people who may not even believe in this mumbo jumbo relativism stuff, right? Just to make it seem like, okay, the author is not a complete like lunatic, some frantic person talking about relativism out of context, right? Cool.
All right. In contrast, whether something is moving or not is relative to a spatio-temporal framework, not to anyone's opinion about whether it is moving. So it seems like this is more more definitely relative. Again, the idea so far has been that witchcraft is not relative, so motion is relative. Maybe the Bogosian idea is that that's not really a fair comparison. Let's keep reading and see if we better understand. It says Bogosian suggests that, and this is all a quote for the rest of the sentence, a morality is constituted by opinions about moral right and wrong. So moral relativism is like witch relativism. Okay, so I think that sentence made it more clear. It's not like motion, right? Where it's truly relative. It's you either are or you're not. You're a witch or you're not. You can't be half witchy, according to Bogosian, because it's based on opinions.
Okay.
Okay, he concludes that the proper response to the thought that there is not a single true morality is to stop believing in moral right and wrong. Okay, that's even more direct. If there's not a true morality, stop believing in right versus wrong. Give up the idea of morality as a whole. You can't. If it's not universal, it doesn't exist, is kind of
That's
the
kind of
idea.
what we were expecting Boghossian to say, right? If there's no
Yeah.
absolute, then there's no relativism. Now it's not about witchcraft, it's about morality, right? And now again, this isn't the author. He concludes. He concludes. It's Boghossian, Paul Boghossian. Okay.
Yes. Okay, and then the last sentence says the proper response is moral nihilism, not moral relativism. So it sounds like moral nihilism is probably just like the vocab term the author's using to describe Boghossian's beliefs.
Yeah. This idea that you just stop thinking of, don't even believe it. Don't even believe in morality, which is
Yeah.
what nihilism is, right? We
Mhm.
don't, yeah, like where life is just meaningless. There's no such thing as right or wrong. Okay.
That's not a word that you necessarily need to know, but it has come up in multiple passages. I always just think about it is it's like annihilate. Like you've just annihilated all thoughts or beliefs in something.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. But also in this context, you don't need to know it, right? Like you just
Hmm.
nihilism is this idea that you just stop believing. It says is to stop believing in moral right or wrong.
Yes.
So yeah, but that's yeah, I like that. That's a great trick to like keep track of it. Like the it's not really a root thing, but like, it sort of sounds like annihilate, so it makes
Yeah.
sense.
They share a prefix or suffix in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Same root word, but different
Yeah,
arrangement
right.
for sure. Okay, so that was paragraph two. And it sounds like most of paragraph two, we were very focused on Boghossian and this idea of moral nihilism, right? No true morality. If there's no true morality, then just give up on morality, period. Okay, paragraph three starts and it clarifies all our questions, but that response is too quick. So it's too quick, probably not thought through well enough, perhaps. Like, why is it too quick? The but though is telling me, hey, we might be now going against Boghossian, going back to the original. I agree with moral relativism.
Which we expected.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, there are other more relative or relevant here. Here it's coming in relative.
Yeah.
There are other more relevant comparisons with what we might call football relativism and legal relativism. Okay, we've had motion relativism, we've had witch relativism, we've had football relativism, legal relativism, and moral relativism.
Something tells me that nothing's changing. And this is
Yeah.
just going to be the same jargon with different contexts, right?
Hmm.
Personally, my favorite one was the witch one. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, Molly, but I don't like this is something like on test day. I'm reading really quickly at this point because I get what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Once it clicks, like I'm still reading the rest. It's just like I'm not gonna like sit there and worry about every word, right? Like I'm just trying to make sure that we're not switching gears. And I doubt that the author is going to switch gears at this point in the passage.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah. And with all these types of relativism, note that to the author, all of them support this idea, probably that other than witchcraft. We have to hold on for football and legal, but because of the framing of this paragraph, probably football and legal relativism are going to support mo moral relativism too. So it's just like know that witchcraft is the witch relativism is the only one that's not necessarily in alignment with the author.
That's a good way of looking at it. And then also that response is too quick, that contrast gives us all the clarity we need that the author is kind of, you know, refuting, kind of going against the second paragraph.
Yeah.
So we know we're going back to that first paragraph with that contrast word.
Yes.
The ideas of the first paragraph. Okay.
Yes. Okay, football relativism is the sensible idea that there are different versions of football with different rules. That to me, pausing at the semicolon sounds maybe relativism, which is the whole idea. Whether something deserves a penalty is relative to which version of football is being played. So, yep, it's relative. Like you said, Jack, I'm not expecting a major contrast, but we're always on the lookout in case ideas change. It hasn't changed so far.
Right.
Legal relativism is the view that whether something is legal is relative to the legal system, and there are different actual and possible legal systems. So again, relativism is that laws are relative. I'm sensing a theme here. I
And I
think,
think that's why like the lawyers exist, right?
mhm,
Because the law can be interpreted depending on the circumstance, on the situation, right? So I can see how the legal system is really relative. But
yeah.
yeah,
So we're basically just going back to P1. Same
right,
idea.
right.
All right, paragraph 4. Different groups of people may play different versions of football. Okay, back to football relativism. Different, it could be different. It's probably relative to each other. Different societies may have different legal systems. Again, same thing. Um, and different people may have different moralities. Yes.
Finally, it's
I'm
going
picking up
back.
what you're putting down, author.
Yeah.
Being very clear.
I mean, if it wasn't like this third paragraph is a repeat of the first paragraph. So I have now established the main idea, right? The main idea is the argument that repeats more than one paragraph. You could have more than one argument, main argument. Now it's clear, but it's also expanding in the fourth paragraph. So it's made it even easier for me to identify it.
Yes. Okay, moralities accepted at one time may fail to be accepted at another time. Okay, so not just different groups of people, but different time frames. Individuals within any given group may have different moralities. Again, no one true morality. A particular person may accept different mutually incompatible moralities at different times and even at the same time. Yeah, it sounds like cognitive dissonance. You're like believing things, believing in moralities that are in conflict with each other. But again, it's all relative. And it says those relative moralities work just fine in different situations. Okay. So it sounds like, again, the author believes that relative morality is enough to help us navigate right and wrong. That's
That's
the
right.
idea from P1.
It works just fine, right? That's very powerful, profound, and that's the author's opinion. That's the author saying it directly to us. So when you're reading, guys, just keep track of who's saying what and how the author presents things. Those words can give you a lot of context as to what the author cares about.
Good advice. All right, let's start our last paragraph, paragraph 5. It says, what is it for a group or an individual to have a particular morality? You're posing a question to me, author, and now you have me curious about the answer to your question. So, are we going to expand on what exactly it means to have morality? Are we going to have one of those situations where in the final paragraph we go off on a separate tangent? Or are we just going to tie this right back to relativism? We're going to find out. In some ways, it is like having a particular language with a particular syntax and vocabulary. Okay, the particular language, particular syntax does kind of sound like it's, a unique voice for each person. Perhaps the voice is analogous to morality. Um, Again, let's keep reading and see if this idea really plays itself out. It says you may have a morality in this way without being able to give anything like a precise specification of the principles of that morality, just as you are not able to give a precise specification of the grammar in your language. Okay, so it can be hard to communicate exactly why you believe something is right or wrong, just the same way as it's hard to explain your own grammar. Okay.
This is a little too convoluted. But
I
again,
agree.
if you're wasting your time trying to understand this deeply, like don't not waste of a time, but if you're trying to go back and reread it because you felt like it was too hard to read, you're wasting your time, right? Like read it carefully one time and try to understand it. But we're good. We should be able to answer virtually all the questions. Now, sometimes the last paragraph will deviate, and I don't think that would ever happen here because how confident the author was in explaining their idea earlier on. But sometimes they can just go on off a new idea, completely different idea in this paragraph, and we do need to be responsible for it. But this language is complex. It's too much. So I don't see anything coming off the screen that seems really obvious to me.
I agree. Yeah, they're not being clear enough. If they're going to introduce a brand new idea that ends up being important in the last paragraph, it should be clear. You should understand what the idea is. Here, not so much. If anything, it's another comparison. Now we're talking about grammar and morality. Add it to the pile of comparisons we've
Right.
made to morality. Call it a day. You may accept some aspects of a morality as a member of a group. You may accept some aspects simply for yourself, and you may accept some aspects simply as what is right. So again, you're kind of free to customize your morality. It's all relative to each other anyways, is kind of the idea. There's no one true morality. All right, moral relativism finds that there is no objective way to establish that a particular morality is the correct morality and concludes that there is no reason to believe in a single true morality. That is almost, it's not an exact restatement of P1, but it's very similar. There's no true morality, and that's a component of moral relativism. It's just like even the very first sentence of the paragraph, of paragraph one, I mean. One last sentence in the paragraph, number 5. But even if there's no single true morality, relative morality will work fine. All right. Pretty nice way to wrap us up there, Jack. Did we end up seeing anything important in paragraph 5?
Nothing that was not already discussed. I mean, I do believe the last two sentences are pretty important, but
Hmm.
it's a rehash of what was already stated in the first paragraph, the third paragraph, the fourth paragraph. There's really only, I think, three ideas in this entire passage. Like, isn't that insane? Three ideas. And that's what I meant when I said if the passage is more conceptually difficult to understand, this idea of morality, relative morality is really conceptually difficult to understand. There are going to be less ideas in the passage. And that means the questions are going to be easier, right?
Yeah,
Harder read, easier questions. Easier
agreed.
read, longer passage, more ideas. In my opinion, the questions are harder because you have to be more precise, more specific with what they were saying.
Yeah.
I like these kinds of passages because I think if you don't freak out and you focus on what matters based on the strategies we're talking about here, you're going to be fine. You're going to go through these questions and get 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 right or more, right? So yeah, I'm excited for students to try this out, uh,
Yes.
read and figure out. But the three ideas are that there's this idea of moral relativism where there's no single true morality, right? No single true right or wrong. But then there's this other idea, right, that there is a relative notion of morality, right? It's relative to right or wrong. Those are two ideas brought up in the first paragraph, very profound. And then the third and final idea of this whole passage is the second paragraph, where we're talking about nihilism, right? This idea that if there is no absolute, then there is no relative. So it's completely contradicting the first paragraph, right? And if you
Hmm.
just know those I guess yeah, I would say three ideas. Those three ideas, you're gonna be okay. The rest of this is a rehash of those three ideas,
Yeah.
right? We'll specifically the ideas from the first paragraph. So paragraph 3, 4, 5, nothing new, just literally rephrasing the first paragraph. And I think it's exactly what happened, what you said happened, right? The second paragraph brought up the point that the author wanted to rebuttal, and the author did that in the third, fourth, and fifth paragraph.
Yep. We had so many paragraphs in support of those ideas with moral relativism, and we even had the author directly state it. So this one, we definitely had a lot of support for that. But I mean, expect to see questions about the author's ultimate perspective on moral relativism compared to Boghossian's idea, right? Of there's no true morality, stop believing it, nihilism. So if you're curious about the questions themselves, if you're feeling like, put me in, coach, I'm ready to go get 5 out of 5, click on the link in the description or navigate to our website, jackwestin.com. This is the daily passage for November 19th called Moral Relativism. Always give the questions a try after listening to a CARS reading skills workshop like this. Gives you a good chance to test your knowledge and your reasoning, especially after having such a solid understanding of the passage. We hope you've enjoyed our episode for today, and we hope to see you in the next one. Until then, happy studying and have a good rest of your day.